6:15 p.m. We will begin with roll call. Bill Bontempi, Sean Kennedy,
here,
and Michelle Boudreau here. If you'd please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we will begin with a discussion of cost-cutting savings being done in the district. Aaron?
So you guys have a list of 4 items that I guess we're considering cost savings. The latest is we've done a little bit of reconfiguring. I think items 1, 2, 3 we've talked about. Item 4, we've reconfigured admin assistants in student services. We've transitioned 2 admin assistants to 0.75 status, so that we predict will save us about $20,000.
As we continue to do this, I think we should rework the first 3 and just put the dollar amounts with them so that it's consistent all the way through. Okay.
Kevin, the reduction to 0.75, was that a reflection of a reduction in the work, or is this entirely a budget issue?
Yeah, so a lot of IEPs are now done remotely. So the scheduling of staff and the scheduling of families is much easier. A parent can take an IEP from their cell phone or whatever. Additionally, all the signatures can now be done electronically. It used to be you had to actually get physical signatures from everyone. So the actual workload involved in managing IEPs has actually gone down a bit. So Gina saw an opportunity to change some things. We did have to impact bargaining with the union. We got through that, and we're feeling okay about it.
There was also retirement, so it gave us an opportunity to do some restructuring.
Just food for thought along those lines too. If you could go 0.15 more, you save a lot more, because now you don't have the benefit issue.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, we've actually in town some time ago stopped hiring part-time people.
Right.
We'd rather have 1 full-time person than just ship them on 2 departments. And hire 2 3/4 people.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Do you mind if I take over? Thank you. First off, I want to apologize. It was a weirdest thing. There was this accident. I got stuck around it. It was just, I'll explain later, but it was just ridiculous. I'm so sorry about that.
Sean, you weren't in it though.
No, he didn't. I didn't get hit. Instead of hitting me, he hit the guy next to me. There was a parked car, so I just went around so I wouldn't be stuck out in traffic. He hit that guy instead of me, and then I couldn't stop. I couldn't move because I was waiting for that guy to come out. This guy was stuck. He was yelling at this guy. This guy was yelling at that guy, and I was stuck. I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. Just sit there and wait and try not to get hit. It was really crazy. Hit in the face. I mean, yeah.
Oh.
All right. So thank you for those cost cutting. I'm going to work with you on this. I want to put it in Excel, and it's going to be a lot of fun. This thing here. So the Minnetonka Regional High School capital needs assessment update.
What we shared with the school committee on Thursday. So we are out for building envelope and physical plant. We're expecting quotes back by the December 1st for the IT infrastructure needs and classroom needs and staff needs. That is due back December 15th. In both cases, we expect the actual work to take a couple months. We're expecting a site visit, some collaborative efforts, and things like that. So once we have a winning bidder, we'll work with them on time frame.
IT infrastructure, was that going to include the cost of the cameras or no?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I am working to arrange a meeting
with the middle school
with the folks who did the middle school. They are actually on, I think it's the state contract, so okay. I think we would be able to work specifically with them. Without necessarily having to bid a project out. Okay. But nonetheless, what we'll do is we'll get sort of a ballpark per Minnetonka to build it out as if it was going to be the hub and a hub and spoke model for the rest of the schools. That would bring the middle school in, and then as other schools came online, obviously, Green Meadows would be the responsibility of Hamden, the Wilbraham Elementary Schools
Yeah.
So right now, the camera systems are several different systems, like, what is it, 5 different systems?
7 separate systems, but with
Yeah.
3 or 4 different sort of vendors and.
Because it's been done with piecemeal, so what we're trying to do is we're using, what's the name of the company? I can never remember it.
I forget,
Whatever.
Vigilon is the
Vigilon,
actual
right.
end product,
Yeah,
but the
and-
company doing it's different.
And they were recommended by the police department because they said they can interact with those, and I think we want them to have some visibility with our cameras.
You know, the amazing part about the discussion that we had with the cameras was we were actually talking about school security with the cameras, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I think the estimate was like 98% of what we use the cameras for is basically for investigating complaints and things
Oh,
that
yeah.
happen in
Yeah.
the school,
Yep.
which
Absolutely.
was shocking to me. Like, I didn't realize it was that big, and like, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a principal in another school district, he's like, all day. All day, you literally are just pulling up footage, you know, somebody's sneakers were stolen, somebody did this, somebody was, you know, it smells like smoke in the bathroom, and that's basically what they're using it for. So, just so we know, 140 cameras, and it's basically used to monitor, you know, 1,000 students in the building and their activities and unraveling little day-to-day crimes.
When we get that capital needs assessment update, we'll make sure we'll share it with the towns and everything like that, so we can, you know.
Do you guys have a copy of the town of Wilbraham's assessment they did back in '21?
I do not.
I do, yeah.
You should compare that to the capital needs on your
Sure.
worksheet too.
Excellent.
So with that said, the camera piece, we will be meeting with them sometime in early December, the first couple weeks of December.
Okay.
Mike Messier's working to set up a meeting with them. Bill Powers, myself, Mike Messier, Dave Rogers. So we have probably Steve Hale, so we have all the main stakeholders in
Yep.
place.
And that also encompasses the consultants, correct?
Yeah, 3, 4, and
Yeah.
5 are basically the same thing. I think they just
Yeah.
got sort of reconfigurated.
All right, and then we're gonna go, I want to bring up again, and this is something that we should probably talk about. We'll know more, you know, as time moves on, but the cost of the reconfiguration, there was an update, it says update here, or just to discuss it?
I didn't put that item on here,
Okay.
I think that was yours. Yeah, I think John has been talking a little bit about the cost of sort of redoing the library. The library has, you know, pretty much been taken apart. I think we'd like to, you know, probably look at having someone come in, someone who knows libraries, and come in and sort of give us some sort of estimate of what it could look like and what.
We're talking the middle school library?
Middle school library.
Oh, I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Scared the heck out of me. I was like, geez, we were just
Right
taking
now,
out
the number
Thursday,
of
what happened?
students, yeah, the number of
So-
students it's being used
Yeah.
as instructional space.
Right, right.
2 classrooms and then a little sliver in the middle which still has some books, so we've really,
And the offices are also being used for classrooms.
and the
So,
offices are being used for
Yeah.
classrooms.
so John, there was I guess there was a compelling piece when I looked at the information that you gave me about the size of the buildings, the planned operating capacities, and then the usable educational space. The one that really stuck out to me was Wilbraham Middle School. And the planned operating capacity for that building is 750. And the usable educational space, I think you pegged it like 350. What was the major drivers for that? I mean, that's a huge
difference?
disparity, yeah.
Because when you get it's occupancy, it's not really planned usable space. So that means how many people could you legally have in the building? So if your classrooms are full, if your cafeteria was full, if your gymnasium was full, everyone had as many people as possible.
Right.
But, you know, that's really something that you only get to if you're doing like a major event in your auditorium space while school is going on, while you also have another thing happening in the cafeteria. That's like the only time you ever hit that limit. You're always operating much below that.
I think that's a different one. Planned operating capacity versus your maximum. Your maximum occupancy is basically the load that you would need in a building in order to keep people safe in case there was a fire.
That's
The
right.
planned operating capacity was supposed to be set, because the POC on this building is 1,250. Right, the POC on the middle school was 750, the POC on Green Meadows was, or I'm sorry, with TWB was 350. So I think you were talking about the usable space, but the planned operating capacity, I mean, that building's 99,000 square feet, which is relative to the other school buildings that we have pretty large. The next largest school that we have is Memorial. Memorial's 22,000 square feet less. So in terms of instructional space, I know the middle school model drives that a little bit.
So what I was saying, one thing is, that first column on that table
Yeah.
was the fire occupancy.
Yeah.
So it was that number. It wasn't planned usable, because the only one that I have, the actual planned usable for, is Minichog. The rest of the buildings are so old, I couldn't go back and find what the original plan for the usable space was.
Right, but
So
I
then when I
think
get
you
to
said I think you said the useful educational space in the
Right.
middle school was 350.
So then when I get to that, for all of those, all we did was we counted up the number of actual classrooms that exist and said 25 if you want to go to the outside, or 20 if you want to go to sort of a more reasonable size.
Okay. So that's so you're telling me we only have 14 classrooms in that building?
You have to, let me amend my answer, you have to also subtract from that classes that you're taking out because they're special education spaces or other spaces that have to be dedicated to a smaller size student, so that reduces that. But basically that was our methodology. We went around, we counted up how many classrooms can we use now, and then we just did multiply by 20 or 25.
Minus what was being taken up for other special
Right.
education classrooms, you know, sub-separate classrooms, things like that.
Correct. Correct, and then some classroom spaces, even though they exist, they are kind of special use places. Like, for example, the art room's only gonna be the art room, the band room's only gonna be the band room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are one of the ones in your rotation, and they take spaces which you can, you know, include to increase your capacity. But if someone said, well, could you turn that into an English class? Not really,
Right.
you know?
Okay.
The important part is that when we do this reconfiguration that we're working on right now, there will be some costs up front in order to make it happen. And that's something that, you know, I wouldn't say this is the year or next year's the year to actually do it, but, you know, this is the cards we've been dealt, so to speak. We're gonna refine those numbers, but we want you to be aware. We did share with, I don't know if you got them, but I know we sent them.
And
Oh, can you make sure he has access to the
Yes, I shared the drive with
The
Mark,
drive.
and
Awesome.
I just added Todd to
good?
their garden.
And also some ongoing costs, because one of the things we will have to do is pull back on the number of choice students we could take. So, you know, in the out years, the loss of choice will build up to extra money that we'll need in the local budget in order to sustain having a reconfiguration.
Or we can add more, after the first year, start adding up and building up the choice students.
We might be able to put them in different places, but
The problem is that they're all going to funnel into the high school.
right.
So even if you're ironing out gaps at the lower level, you're still taking 5 grades and then cloistering them all in one building, which means when they're separated among 2 or 3 buildings, you probably won't feel the pressure. But when you get them all in one building, all of a sudden it's gonna be like, oh wow, that's a lot of choice kids. And trust me, I mean, I'm personally, I'm conflicted about it because I've never been a great fan of school choice simply because I feel like it's municipal welfare. I feel like municipalities get away with having substandard school districts simply because the parents who really care about the education of their students will simply make a decision to choice out to another district. And on the other hand, I look at the financial ramifications for a district like us and I think, well, it's great because we're getting that money, but at the same time, we're spending $17,000 per student for education, and we're getting 5 for a choice kid, and it's like, well, where's the trade-off in that? And we've had this discussion this is my 9th year. We've had this discussion every year, and that is trying to be able to figure out, where is the break-even point? We know that. School choice, if you have a school choice kid and they have high needs, those special education costs go back to the sending district. We don't need those. but there's all of the other costs that come in, adjustment counselors and speech, the things that, you know, would fit in below circuit breaker levels that we absorb. And we don't, there's no way to figure that out, like it's trying to figure out how much vanilla extract is in the cake batter, you know, so. It's a hard decision to make, but at the same time, I think that as a school district, our number one responsibility is to educate the students within our two towns and find the best way to do that. And then the choice can fit in around that and fill in some of the edges. I'm okay with that, but I don't want it to be the driver of this.
Right. That's why we have to wait and see how things work out.
Have you decided on a plan yet?
Excuse me?
Have you decided on a plan yet?
No, we still have not, well, we have,
I
we have
the
different
way it
options.
sounded like you were going, and I was like.
It's whittled down to.
Yeah,
Look, when we got together, it was like 8 options, so if you whittled it down to 4?
yes,
4 now?
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, good for you.
So the coin flip is next week.
And by the way, we did go,
Sorry.
a couple weeks ago, we were on the Cape for the Massachusetts School Committee Conference. We did visit 3 different schools that were the 8 through 12 models. Talked to them about the challenges of becoming an 8 through 12 and what were the benefits and stuff like that. So we're gonna be talking about that tomorrow at the meeting in an open discussion, which should be really good. But it was really great. Some of the things we didn't even think about, they brought to our attention. It was especially like, you know, watching out for the teachers. You know, when the teachers come in, we gotta take care of the teachers because everyone was focusing on the students. And then you have these 8th grade teachers come into a high school and, you know, there was a whole issue there too. So some stuff like that, they really opened our eyes to. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. And now, we just so that you know, we are going to start union negotiations for the contract. Instead of waiting until next year, we're gonna start the beginning of next year.
2 separate pieces. One,
Yeah.
related to the last thing you said, is to impact bargain reconfiguration. So the union wants to do that this year, if possible, so that they're not trying to figure that out while we're also doing negotiations on the core contracts.
What's the contract then?
Contract ends the end of next school year, so next year would be a negotiation year.
So June of 25.
2025, or 22 to 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to put it on your radar that that's coming and it's never cheap. We have good teachers. All right, okay, discuss possible increase in the next budget. Was that something I put on there?
Yes.
Was there an explanation of what I put on there?
I was, when I reviewed,
Maybe in response to the letter I sent you guys.
when I reviewed the,
Right.
yeah, when I reviewed the agenda, I thought it was basically going to be a, you know, where's the number at?
Right, yeah. So, we have not really, we don't have a budget ready to give you yet, because in the past, we've done it, and it's just been an exercise, because we don't really know what it's gonna be until we really get into it. So rather than just give you fake numbers or numbers that don't mean anything in the beginning, I thought it'd be more prudent for us to have these discussions, get on the same page, have you really understand what we're going through with the schools. So that when it comes time for the budget, we have real numbers that we can look at and discuss and really dive into. I know that the assumption is that, oh, there's so much fat in the school budget, we can cut here, we can cut there, you guys can do without $1 million, you guys can do without $2 million, whatever, you know, there's so much fat, you can cut it. But we want you to understand that, at least from our point of view, we're pretty close to being skeletal right now, and we want you to see that, we want you to understand what we're doing and how we've cut. That's why we had this exercise in the beginning. I said to them, whenever you're doing cost-cutting stuff, like include it, so we have this big list, so that when you say to us, hey, what are you doing to save our money, because the taxpayers' money is, town's money is what's funding the schools, we can say, look at, this is what we're doing, and then you can really understand everything that's going on, including that we have union negotiations coming up and such. Yeah, but also,
About number 7, the main cost of that for the next year would be salaries, because we have closed contracts at the end of the year, but there'll be an increase in legal costs to negotiate
contracts. So
Right.
we'll plan for that next year. Now, Mark, can you talk to us about that letter that you sent out?
Yeah, so this time every year, we send, we don't, but the town administrator sends out a letter to the department heads, basically outlining what they expect, to prepare their budget, right, to give them some expectations. This year, the expectation is a 0% increase on every line item. And if they have to take some increase, then they need to justify it. So,
That's a zero, so zero budget increase?
0% line item increase and budget increase. At least in part, we had a Board of Assessors did a presentation with the Wilbraham Selectmen a few weeks back, and this past year, we took a $3 million increase in expenses, which is about, I think it's gonna affect the average household $750 a year. A pretty significant jump. I don't think Wilbraham's gonna tolerate much more of that.
$3 million in expenses for what?
$3 million.
No, you said a $3 million increase in expenses.
You mean operating expenses, right?
There was a $3 million increase in operating, in year-over-year levies this past year. 3.04, I think it was, million, year-over-year. And I think that's gonna be a difficult pill for a lot of people to swallow once they get their Q3 and Q4 tax bills. I think they're gonna have a lot of pushback. I don't think it's impacted them yet, because they haven't seen those tax bills yet, but they will very soon. And I think it's gonna be difficult. And, I mean, the schools are a big part of that. I mean, so, I think, settle up.
Well, I don't know if anybody else saw the story, the state revenue projections came in 4 months under projections.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. Most recent revenue came in, I can't remember the number, but that's four months in a row now, under projection.
So wasn't that the cliff you were talking about, Aaron?
Which clip?
The cliff.
The clip,
Clip,
yes,
yes.
yes. I mean,
We're
I
heading, we're barreling
I guess-
100 miles an hour towards a deathly precipice. And,
This is.
you know, we've seen it coming for the last several years. We've said it last year, we said it the year before, we said it the year before. You know, now that all of that COVID money's dried up, all that ESSER funds are gone, you know, you're really gonna start to,
Yeah,
the
start paying for things, yeah.
the water, well, and you know, I brought this up the other night at school committee too, and the other thing is that we've seen it's been an entire generation of people that have not had to think about funding this building. And so it's been, I guarantee you, this building's been here 11 years, 12 years, and it was at least 7 or 8 that they weren't funding anything for the old Minichog, because they knew they were gonna build a new school. And so it's 20 years in, and we've got capital needs for this building, and, you know, we've gotta get, I don't know how to do it exactly, because I wasn't here when, you know, at the time when they were looking for capital needs for this building, but we have to get back into the mindset of making the voters understand and making the citizens understand that this is our responsibility. And while we can be fiscally prudent about how we maintain our facilities, we also have to be very, very careful with how we cut corners and what the potential impacts are. When we were talking at technology last week, or at the school committee meeting on technology, talking about the wireless access points. I know it doesn't seem like a huge thing, but we have 140 wireless access points in this building and 1 controller. We have a backup controller, but everything that we have is out of warranty. So if something breaks, I mean, we can get another WAP to plug in to fill, but the controller, the backup controller that we have, we bought it on eBay. It works, but it's out of warranty. So, you know, we're seriously, like, we're running right now, you know, we're driving down the road, but there's not much road on either side to swerve. And, you know, it would be pretty calamitous if the network was down in this building. Every single thing that we do in this building educationally depends on that wireless network. So, you know, like I said, while we start talking about saving money, and, you know, and pushing projects, capital needs projects down the road in this building, I want us to be very mindful of the fact that some of these things may end up really negatively impact education. And if you get to the point where that wireless controller goes down, I mean, you have no idea how long it's gonna take. I mean, can you imagine on an emergency basis replacing a controller and 140 wireless access points? And what you would do to education in the meantime.
Mark, are we still
You
on
need the
board?
money to do it, start with.
Yeah, are we still on board, like, that idea that we had about having the fund set up with the two towns to have their own funds for Minichog? Is that still on the
So-
table?
So, I pushed on that issue, to set up a committee, and it was ruled by our attorney that it had to be a formal committee. So those people have been appointed. In fact, I just got an email today asking if we were available, like in the next few days to meet. Not sure if it's gonna happen this week or next week, but it sounds like we're gonna start meeting. I don't think this is gonna be a long committee, but the goal of the committee, and I think you've been invited, at
I haven't
least,
seen anything yet.
okay, well, I think we're gonna invite a couple of us, a couple of people from Hamlin as well. The goal of the committee is to set up a process on how we're gonna fund Minichog and how are we going to, the process and how we're gonna fund the process.
Who did you invite from the school committee to be on that?
I don't know if anybody got invited to the school committee, not sure.
Can I just advocate here for someone from the schools should be involved, because one of the pieces of feedback we got from the Department of Education on our proposal to revise the regional agreement is we gotta figure out a way to handle our capital needs. So whatever comes out of that would have to be written in there.
My initial thought was to do this kind of on the QT and just sit down with some members and we can all kind of hammer it out in a small group. Now that this is a formal committee, it's kind of out of my hands. I would recommend somebody call in town hall, say you'd like to have, I've told them you wanted to be involved. I'm not sure where that's at, I'm not sure, I don't know.
Would that be to Nick or to someone else?
You could ask Nick, sure, he's involved, I mean, he's been involved in this, because he's the one who reached out to the attorneys. I know there's Sue Bonnell, myself, Kevin Hanks from FinCom, and I think it's gonna be Nick Benelakis from Capital, but I'm not sure if it's Nick or not, but there's somebody from Capital as well. And again, set up a process on how we're gonna do this, and then also,
I thought you said Hamden was also invited, or?
I don't know if they were actually invited or not. But again, they may set up an entirely different process. So while I welcome the idea of them being there, and I think Sue welcomed the idea of them being there, we may choose to do something very differently than they do, and that's their choice.
But at least to be part of the discussion, so we all know what each other's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a regional agreement,
Right.
I mean, whatever it is,
Yeah.
whether it's part of the
It's
regional.
gonna have to be-
Formally, we
Yep.
have to all agree that this is how we're gonna be funding the capital projects going forward.
But you may fund them entirely differently than we do, so,
Right,
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of, mechanisms within the town.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
To Mark's point, the regional agreement and even DESI would be agnostic to where the money comes from, right?
just need to-
You guys can
Doesn't matter.
rob banks if
Yeah.
you want, as long as the money comes through. I mean, that's.
They just want to.
Wait, we can rob banks?
Just wanna know what the system is.
I mean, I'm not.
They just wanna know what
suggesting
they just wanna know what the mechanism is to be able to
Yeah,
provide
After
that.
much chagrin, after much
Yeah, how
pain.
we assess it to the towns, how that money gets asked for from the towns.
So after much pain, it's finally got some motion happening, which it just seems like it's taking forever.
We had some discussion at our town meeting about this issue of capital, made it very clear that, we'll be seeing more of these,
Requests.
you know?
So I asked the two of you, our two senior members here, because you guys were around, maybe Mark, you're kind of on the cusp, but I know, Doug, I know you've been around. So how, when the old Minichog, when you guys were funding capital requests for that building, was there any, how were you guys going about that? Were you guys doing it the same way we do it now, or we just come out with a capital list and we bring it to town meeting?
There was no process, there was no procedure, it was ad hoc.
Or was it melded into the school budget?
The smaller things were just melded into the budget. There was one specific article outside of the operating budget that actually was $1.5 million. It was a group of things included like the utility building where Mike's office is, that was one of the things. That was the only article that was outside the operating budget. And that
Okay.
was probably in the mid-90s.
Wow. Yeah, and I don't know how Wilbraham did it, because I got on FinCom, I think in 2005 initially, and I don't recall anything standing out from how Wilbraham did it.
What do you guys, when's, select meeting again? Sue must remember that. Sue's been around for.
I think what we did 20 years ago is kind of irrelevant to how we're gonna do it now, though.
The
The
serve
way
as
it was
a
done should not be repeated.
Yeah.
serve as
Leave
a
it at that.
serve as a benchmark for when was done. So how do we know how do we know not to repeat it if we don't know what it was?
That's why I keep banging the drum about that capital thing every year in the budget. Nobody wants to put it in, myself included, but it has to be there. People have to understand, these expenses are here, they're gonna keep coming. And I've been banging the drum constantly. This expense has to be dealt with.
I'll speak for myself only, not for this committee. What I thought about doing, and I've talked to Sue about it, was I said we ought to set up a separate stabilization account in town for this. And then how we fund it, I think is yet to be determined, but we would set it up. The money would be deposited into that account. The school committee would then ask at a town meeting, they want X amount of dollars from that account, that's the budget effectively, and then we would, the townspeople would vote on it. And presumably capital or somebody else would have a recommendation around that, and then the residents would vote on it at town meeting. It's much like we already do with capital. I mean, we have a very formal process, you guys don't have this a formal process for capital plan as we do, but it's an exact similar analogy to that.
Well, however, it's done, to Aaron's point, I mean, at the school committee level, like, we leave that to you guys. I mean, our process is that we assess what we need, and then we come to you with, our hat in our hand and say, please, and
Yeah,
so.
but right now, there really is no
And we have a-
mechanism for this.
Well, to Doug's point,
Except the regional agreement.
to Doug's point, it's the,
It would have to be in the budget, yeah.
the stabilization fund, but at the end of the day, I mean, with our capital needs requests, I mean, we would literally drain that account to zero and still need $1 million.
I will say this, and
$3 million.
speaking for myself, I'm not at all comfortable about putting not excessive, but large sums of money in the stabilization account that the school committee can spend as they feel appropriate.
But
I would rather have I think the voters need to be involved in this discussion.
well, I think the bigger question is why are we gonna have, I mean, it's much like, OPEB accounts, things like that. I mean, you're gonna have all of this money sitting in a stagnant account where, we're cutting teachers, we're cutting programs, we're cutting, all kinds of services for students, but we have this big lump of money sitting in an account. I mean, that has never made sense to me. Like, I mean, you have a working account, the E&D, totally understand, right? That's your emergency fund, that's basically what you should have in reserve in case some untoward event happens, which we've seen in the past 20 years.
Every year, yeah.
Well, I mean, the last one was really the 9C cuts, I mean, when Deval Patrick first took over. I mean, that was devastating. I mean, if it wasn't for E&D, we would have had to go back to town meeting to ask for more money. So, but having, all of these different stabilization funds, you have this capital stabilization fund, you have $5 million, let's just say, as an example, which is still woefully inadequate for a building of this size, but then we're cutting teachers and we're cutting program, and it naturally begs the question, what are we doing? Like, why are we saving money, why are we putting all this money in to save money? And I would think the taxpayers would say the same thing. They're like, well, why am I paying such a high tax rate if you're not spending the money and you're sticking it into this account and saving it for
Well, I don't think that, I thought that the purpose of the account was for the capital expenses that we would spend every year, but we would have to come and see, prioritize which ones and get the towns to.
It's exactly the process we use for capital
Yeah,
in town.
it's not like
And
we build
very
up
similar,
millions.
a very
we'll be
analogous
using each year.
scenario.
No, but for the first
Do you
8
have a capital
years-
fund?
Yeah, we
For the
do.
first don't forget, for the first 8, 9 years, we didn't have any capital requests for this building, which is
Right.
why we have $400,000 sitting in the account, because we put $50,000 every year into it.
How will we fund that? I guess you could do it through free cash, or you could do it through a debt exclusion of some sort. I mean, I don't know how you would do that every year, but I mean, you'd have to do something. I mean, but.
The capital fund that exists right now, 400, whatever thousand, I mean, that's enough to essentially, pay for the preliminary work on a substantial capital project.
And, I mean,
That's
bear
it.
in mind, we've committed to 165 for the railing. We've committed to up to 35 for, the
Consultancy.
envelope and physical capital needs, and then 25 more for the IT infrastructure.
So now you're down to 175-ish.
But, I mean, we collectively should be able to go to town meeting and make the case for whatever the request is. If you can't convince town meeting that it's a worthwhile project, it's not gonna be funded.
And I go back to, Doug and I talked about this many times, when we built Minichog, one of the biggest obstacles was people were asking like, well, if you let the existing Minichog fall into a state of disrepair, what's to say you're not gonna do with I think they need to, I
Makes
think
all-
they
Which
need
makes
some
all the
ownership.
more reason, which makes all the more reason why when you go to town meeting and you cover these capital requests, I don't think we should be shy about asking for the money at town meeting. I think rather than saying, oh geez, I don't know if they have an appetite for this, just let them know. You say, listen, this was your biggest concern, and just remind them at town meeting, like, when we built this school, we made a promise that we were not gonna let things fall into disrepair. But there is a cost to that, just like there's a cost to maintaining your home. You gotta have somebody come in and service your furnace, you gotta have somebody come in and, and check your roof, you gotta have somebody come in, all of that stuff. So, and every once in a while, things are gonna need to be fixed or replaced.
I do think the process is the easy part. I think how you
Right.
fund it is the hard part.
Where do we get $1 million a year that's not gonna
I
affect the
would-
budget, that's gonna go into
Well,
this?
you can't get $1 million a year without dramatically impacting the budget, so I don't know. I mean, I think you really need to take a look at that, that's the hard part, how you,
$165 tax rate on that.
yeah, I mean, that's a lot of money every year. I mean, we typically don't fund our capital needs in town to $1 million a year. Never mind one building alone.
There was a guy that was on the advisory committee when I started doing this stuff, Dick Jones. Dick was a gruff, kind of a curmudgeon-y kind of a guy. He used to say when these type of issues would come up, he says, I don't need the town to be my bank account. In other words, if you need money, come to me with it. Come to me with a request, but don't come take my money to put it in the bank, put it in the bank.
And
And
I was gonna say, if we were to fund it $1 million a year, which I don't, that means Hamden would have to fund $200,000 a year. So I suspect that's a lot of money for
Not
you
well
guys.
received.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that's the bigger question.
The tightening is already happening
Yeah.
that we've anticipated.
Yes.
And, it's only, in my opinion, it's only gonna.
It's only gonna worse. I mean, we knew this was gonna,
And by the way, that $1 million a year is pretty much spot on, I think, on the low side. I don't even think that, if you look at how much we have on that budget going out over the next 10 years, and we'll know more when the consultants
it'd be
look
really
at it.
interesting to see, because I know
Yeah.
when we did what was it, EBS? EBS was the name of the firm, I think, that did the consultant.
Mhm.
And if you look at that EBS report that I just referenced earlier, against your capital plan, it's wildly different.
Well, I think it was wildly
In
different,
terms
but
of the dollar amounts,
Dollar amounts.
their dollar amounts were
way off,
way off.
on the low, to the low
All
side.
right, one was saying, one of the items I caught was, you were asking to replace windows, they were saying recaulk windows.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong, I'm just saying they're wildly different, and I think if you go to the residents and there's some questions there.
Sure.
Well, I think let's use the example of the alarm at.
The alarm panel at Stony Hill.
At Stony Hill, yeah. The cost was, that they had said in the report was what,
$5,000,
$5,000, and what did it end up costing us?
30.
30?
I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong, I'm really not. I'm just saying they're wildly
We paid
different.
what we paid.
Which creates a
you
series
know?
of questions like, well, what's happening here?
Right,
Well,
well, you can have conversations about replacing windows versus caulking windows. I mean, I'm talking about the apples to apples differences in value. It was an order of magnitude of 10 times. If you take apples to apples, you can argue caulking windows versus replacing windows. That's fine.
I'm not arguing any of that, I'm just saying, I'm not an expert in any of this. It just, when I see those kind of variances, I'm like, okay, what, there's gotta be something going on here.
Well, it's a different approach. Caulking, again, you're not talking apples to apples, you're talking apples to oranges. If I could take a moment just to get on the record, you know, I think we're talking about falling off of a fiscal cliff. I think as we say that, I want to make sure that, you know, we're on the record saying, you know, we're going to be looking at a repeat of last year in terms of the staffing impacts. So, you know, I think there were a lot of surprises when we had that conversation later on, and I think it's important for us to be on the record that, you know, if we're looking at some of the fiscal challenges that I think we're looking at, that's going to be on the table.
Your salary increases alone are gonna drive that budget.
Contractual increases.
Hmm? But you got all 5 bargaining units, you got your staff,
Your pay increases.
Right. And I'm not saying that to threaten or anything like that. It's just a statement of fact, and I think it should be on the record.
And then we have to look at the potential impacts of all of those all that grant money going away. And, you know, we have, you know, I know that we downsized on some staff because as those ESSER grants dried up, we didn't have the money to continue those positions. And, you know, looking at the revenue projections for the state this year, I mean, they're gonna, you know, their coffers are gonna pucker tighter than a snare drum when people start looking for more money. And it's, you know, education is always every politician's, it's their biggest concern when they're running for office. And as soon as they get into office, education is the biggest whipping boy. So the first thing that they want to cut money from is education, because they know that if people stand up and say, we want you to fund education, then they say, great, we can fund all these other projects too. So the state has not kept up where it should be. Education in the state, unfortunately, has taken a turn downwards. All you have to do is look at the Massachusetts performance on the NAEP. Massachusetts used to sweep that test every single year, and we are now like top 5.
And so part of the reason I sent that letter out was I wanted to make sure everybody understood where the town was coming from. I think it's better to get ahead of this earlier than later. I'm not sure where the answers are. It's really early yet for any answers, I think, but I mean, I think the town's realizing it's challenging from our side too.
But I do appreciate though what you said, where you said, what do we need, and let's go to the town with that, you know, and also Doug said that, we're not a bank account, you know, tell us what you need.
Until the taxpayers say no, and I know what you're talking about, Mark, you're talking about, because once taxpayers say yes, then we have to be able to fund that out of the assessments that we have in the town without having to hit like an override. But the idea is, you know, that people move into this town largely because of the schools. And so I think it would be premature to simply assume that nobody in town wants to fund education, so long as we do it. But if we do it in a responsible way, and we come to them and say, look, here's the deal. I mean, you guys all have computers in your houses. Sean's analogy is a great one. Nobody has a 12-year-old computer sitting in their house. Just doesn't happen. Why? Because the ones you get today are so much faster, so much better. My apologies. My
It
apologies.
still has a disk drive.
You got a floppy disk? Yeah. He's the only guy in town that has a TRS-80. So, but I mean that's in the world of technology. I mean that's just the way it is, and so most people understand that. But I mean when it comes to education, I mean this is what drives this town. It's people come here because of the schools. So it would be foolish of us to think that we can, you know, that we're going to underfund the schools and somehow make people happy.
Did you say, so $1 million increase to the budget is what?
About $164, $165,
$164.
roughly $17 per 100,000.
Say again?
Roughly $17 per 100,000.
16 and change.
That's awesome information, thank you. That's really great.
Sean, you still playing the lottery?
Yes. I mean, Mrs. Kennedy said, win the lottery and we can talk about it, but
I
I
was
said,
just
no,
gonna
when we
say-
win the lottery, it's going to the schools, so
That's like-
we gotta see.
You kind of like put yourself into a corner on that.
Yeah.
If you win,
the
there's
next
really no
meeting-
way you can convince people.
Well, what do you guys, what's it looking like on your schedules here?
Well, when are you guys gonna have the budget ready? What is the, what's the plan on that?
I mean,
That's all the governor's budget coming
I
out?
mean, we need the governor's budget for that, that's not until
Okay, end of
January, February, but, I mean, we're starting to cobble pieces. I do have the October 1st numbers I can share, we have, E&B certified, I could share that by the next meeting, no trouble, and we could start talking about that, I mean, what if we did
Could you also let us
December
know-
11th or 18th?
Like the contractual
December.
increases, salary
We could
increases
look
and
at
stuff like that?
Yeah.
If you know of increases now, if we could, have those numbers as well,
Yeah.
so we can look at how much more the budget's gonna be from that?
December
Do you want-
11th, there's technology at 5 and policy at 6.
Yeah, do you really wanna be, is there a reason to meet in December? I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. Doesn't like much goes on. You're not gonna have anything new in December.
25th is a Monday.
25th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, you should have I mean, from a cost side, I mean, a lot of those pieces
Few of
will
the
be put
pieces will be in
together.
place, yeah.
What about December 4th, if we're on the 2-week schedule, which we've been talking about?
We're ready to jump
I'm
into
quoting
the
Michelle.
schedule?
God, put it off. I don't know, Aaron, what do you think in terms of?
I mean, I could be ready to start talking some numbers the 4th if people
Yeah.
wanted to.
I don't think much will change between the 11th, the 4th, the 11th, or the 18th. I think any one of those days
We're
would
not
be
gonna
fine, but I
we
think
won't have any, I mean, if we have a meeting on the 4th,
the
we won't
substantive,
have any new information for the 18th.
the substantive discussion is going to be,
Yeah, so
all right,
we'll meet
here's
once
the
in
big
December.
numbers.
January, it's not gonna be till January.
The big numbers.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, we're
most
not
of
gonna
the-
really have
Why did
anything.
we say that?
Well, most of the drivers though, you have, because.
I'm not opposed to meetings, but like I said, whether it's the 4th, the 18th, the 11th.
I'm not opposed to meeting, I just don't,
No,
if there's nothing
So
to
either the 4th or
discuss,
the
I don't
18th.
need
but
to.
I think he'll come up to you, I think the only thing you're gonna
Either
get
the
out of
4th
that
or the
meeting is
18th,
just
we'll pick
the
one of
big
those days for a
drivers, like
meeting. That would be the only meeting.
where the expenses are. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna be able to present where the,
Yeah,
Gives
because
more time.
you're gonna be able to
Yeah,
present like
it really
where most
only
of the
gives
expenses are, it's just we won't have
each
much in
working
terms
days,
of
we get
revenues.
rid of all that stuff that Jen was just talking about.
Okay.
Just so that you know,
Well, it would certainly give
That
you
week.
a comparison to last year, you
we
know, because I mean,
Oh.
the big question
For
when
me.
we get into is the
Oh,
revenues.
okay.
Like, we don't know
so
the
think
revenues.
of me as Santa
so,
Claus getting
you know,
ready,
so
but
the
I'm gonna
government-
come on the
right.
18th, or I might have to call in, or,
What's that?
I mean, I can come in and go back, so, yeah. Let's do the 18th then.
December 18th?
Yeah.
That's almost a whole month off.
That's fine. We don't need to meet just to meet.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Third,
All in favor?
Request a vote.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, we are adjourned, thank you, everybody.
Perfect. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?